So, a question I have, and this is probably a question that has been on the lips of many people. We've got so much knowledge, there's a wealth of knowledge on this floor here at the moment. Everyone has got their own core niches. How do we bring this all together and have one voice going to Westminster, which we know we do have, but the industry is changing so fast, and there are so many different things happening in all levels of pharmacy. But how do we get ourselves joined up, have a clear voice? I said in my opening speech this morning, pharmacies are undemonstrative. We don't kick doors down. We don't make a big noise. We don't go on demonstrations out in Westminster. We just get on with our job. And we serve our patients. But what can we do to just join everything up? There's so much wealth, there's a wealth of knowledge here. What can we do to bring it all together? Who wants to take the first?
We need a mic. How useful is that?
I've got a roaming mic.
Well, the answer's obvious, Hans. It's called a select committee. So, as I said, we are not starting from... We're not starting from day zero. We're starting from everything that's gone before, and we're trying to pull that together. And the benefit of a select committee doing it as opposed to an all-party group, and the chair of the all-party group sits on my committee, the benefit of us doing it is that we're an official committee of the House, so we can compel anybody to come and speak to us, and the government has to respond to us within a set down time that's set down in the ministerial code. So, it's a formal proceeding, and I'm supported by an army of clerks who back me up and who provide any research that I want and ask any guests, and guests seldom say no to come and speak before a select committee because it's a good platform for them to do so. And so, I think it's a great way to bring it together. I've been in government and I've been on the back benches and I now chair a select committee, and actually, I think chairing a select committee, you can probably have more influence than I did as a junior minister. Because I'm not tied by collective responsibility, I can give the government credit where it's due, and I can give it criticism where not. And critically, because I said in my remarks, we are cross-party, so, Layla, I didn't need to cover my ears when you talk about the opposition, because I talk to them all the time too. Because, as many of you will know, I'm leaving the House of Commons at the next election, but it doesn't mean that I won't. As Tony Benn famously said, he's leaving the House of Commons to spend more time on politics. It doesn't mean that I won't still care about health, prevention, cancer, and pharmacy. And so I'm delighted if the opposition are on board with this agenda, because it means they agree with us. So that's brilliant. So, we are trying to bring it all together. That is exactly what we're trying to do.
Okay. I think we've had a lot of impact at least over the last year, and I think that we have all been making the case for the value of community pharmacy. We've been saying the potential of what we could do, and we've made the case that we need more investment to be able to do that. We've promoted how close we are to our communities and to patients and the support that the public have for our work. And I think that is reaping rewards, and I think we need to continue to do that. And of course, we need all of the ambassadors and allies that we can, whether it be in the House of Commons or the House of Lords, whether it be the think tanks who influence their thinking, whether it be the patient and charity groups who give voice to the needs of patients and health outcomes that we want to achieve. I think there's a huge amount that we can continue to do to build those alliances. And I think, importantly, actually, what Hemant said just before, in terms of also building that influence regionally and locally, and being part of and demonstrating what a valued part we can play in integrated primary care. So I think there's loads that we can do, and we need to continue to do more than that, and more of that. and particularly with elections coming up and manifestos being written, it's really important that we get some of those commitments down there. So I think we are having an impact, and I think, you know, I was talking to a lot of the primary care bodies, obviously all the time, but when we were up at the party conferences, holding our events and being at other events with NHS providers and with NHS Confed and all those bodies, and they were sort of saying, you are having an impact. Pharmacy is punching above its weight. It's got more investment than any other part of primary care at the moment in terms of new investment. So I think we need to continue to be able to do that. And it's productive, it does make a difference, but so long as we really, really focus on the benefits to patients and communities, and really talking about the future in terms of prevention and in terms of long-term condition management, addressing health inequalities and things like that. So, but we need to be focused not just on the problems, which I know is hard sometimes, but also on the solutions we can provide.
Okay. Len, do you want to say?
I do agree with everything that Janet and Steve have said, of course, but one thing I would add is about the vital importance, as we would see it, of pharmacy professional leadership, leading the charge on professional matters. We as the regulator aren't a leadership body at all, but we have a bit of a platform as a regulator, and we're seeking to use that judiciously, and I illustrated some of that in my talk, but actually pharmacy professional leadership is vitally important, and we see that as a key part of the landscape, which is why we were so invested in the work of the UK Commission on Pharmacy Professional Leadership, and why we're so pleased to see that now being taken forward with the new advisory board being created. I think that is a key part of this landscape, because from the point of view of members of the public, it seems to me that that professional voice is a key part of everything that Janet and Steve have been talking about. And we're here, I think, to support that, sometimes in the background, sometimes a bit more in the foreground, but very supportive of that agenda.
Thank you. I have a slightly different perspective, and that is pharmacists are part of a noble profession. We don't talk about the noble work we do. And we are closer to the communities than any profession, and more accessible. So we must make sure that everyone we come into contact with us understands that. But then as a profession, we have a professional body. The Pharmaceutical Society needs to be more assertive and more supported by its members than it is at the present time. I don't just say that as a pharmaceutical society. That is our professional leadership body. And if the leadership is strong, we are strong. The second thing is that the NHS is driven by quality agenda. So as far as I'm concerned, Duncan and his colleagues are my best friends because they are helping me achieve the aspirations that I have in terms of high quality services and behaviors. The third thing is that the trade unions, which is basically MPA, PSNC, who represent our interests. And it is important that we have to be more demanding than we have been. We are passive. They have a role to play on our behalf. And then lastly, I think, so just come back. When I started in pharmacy, my tutor said to me, there's a stool with 3 legs: the professional body, the regulator, and the trade body. You need all of them to work together in order to ensure that you have a successful future. So that is my wish.
Okay. Well, there is a place that this is currently happening, and also to build on what Steve was saying, definitely Health Select Committees is a place. I mean, coming back to your question, how we can get the vision into the Parliament. And that place where we all meet and discuss all of these things is the APPG. So the APPG is a parliamentary group where all pharmacy bodies and including the professional leadership body, come together to push the simple agenda of our profession and our sector forward. So we need, and I've been a big advocate in terms of like supporting the APPG, because it's the route in the parliament where things funnel through, and so you know, getting behind the APPG and working with the APPG, you know, in a coordinated manner is the right way forward. Hato.
Thank you. I think this debate could go on a little while longer, because there's probably a lot of views from the floor as well. But I'll open it up to the floor. We've got some questions. Got a question there from Ian?
Yeah. Hi. Well, first of all, yeah, I think it's actually the other way around. I think the trade associations need to become professional bodies themselves, or clinical associations. They've certainly got to drive that. I was very glad to hear that Duncan had said that. To you, I think this is to you, Layla, a big thank you for what you're doing for this sector personally, and the AIM board. I mean, you've really raised the profile, I believe, of this sector. Now, at your recent AIM event, you had cardiologists there, you had a lipid expert, you had doctors, medics there. What's going on? I mean, just say a bit about what you're doing.
Well, okay. So basically, it comes back to all of us working together for the same purpose, putting the patient at the center of it, and also appealing to the decision makers in terms of like the way they look at where they get value for money. And we also talked about the fact that local is also the way to go forward, particularly with regards to the way the ICBs are operating at the moment. So what we are doing, we're working very closely with, for example, cardiologists and doctors that work on the ICBs to work on plans locally where we can get local services commissioned, particularly in relation to cardiovascular disease. There are some really good work coming on, which is, you know, obviously being planned at the moment, but having this multidisciplinary team coming together with various different expertise to look at how community pharmacy can get involved and get that funding locally is great. I can go and talk about so much about, oh, pharmacy can do this and pharmacy can do that, but when I have those doctors who are involved in it as part of it and being involved in drafting the plan, it's a great thing that resonates with quite a lot of the decision makers. So that is essentially what we are doing. That's why you saw all those you know, doctors and consultants around the table at our event. Multidisciplinary working, collaboration with other parts of primary care and secondary care, I think, is the way forward.
Okay. Yeah, there's a question for there.
First of all, thank you very much for the presentations this morning. They were very informative, and I think I would like to ask a question to the entire panel in a historical perspective. In the last 3 years, we saw the one institution that was remained open throughout the pandemic and served the community. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that. Secondly, after the pandemic, in our high street, we saw the closure of 2 pharmacies, and there's only one standing. And this pressure is ongoing. And I, as an economist, forced to ask a question as to why would a pharmacist want to provide additional services when its core services have not been taken into account. And the second question I would ask is that, what is this thing called Category M? What is its purpose? Is it to try and constrain the margins because we feel that pharmacists are making far too much profits? Well, let's look at the balance sheets. We've got something to look at. The pharmacy is not part of the civil service enterprise, nor is it's not within the NHS completely. It's funding itself, it's got balance sheets, it's got accountability built in. So my question is, why is it the government finds it so difficult to trust, and that's a key word, trust the institution on the high street which stood the ground, provides the services, and why can't it say, well, we trust you enough, we'll get rid of this Category M animal that's constraining it, and we also trust, most importantly, Adam Smith and his invisible hand. If we put the incentive packages in the right manner and form, I'm sure we can deliver all the proactive services we've been talking about. I think that's the way forward. And I would put this to the panel as a great challenge as we come to the renegotiation of this new contract.
Great question.
That's my proposition.
Great question. Who wants to take this one first?
So I understand entirely your point about the core cost and capacity in community pharmacies now. And obviously this is a massive problem for everyone in this room. Last year when we went into negotiations for year 4 and 5, we bid for that money for 1.2 billion to top us up to where we should have been if our funding had kept pace with inflation. And we also bid for Pharmacy First. And both of those things were knocked back. But obviously as the year developed and we had a succession of ministers, we had the opportunity to remake that case. Now, it's not an easy argument, and I've explained this many times in this sort of forum, but it's not an easy argument to make, given how much pressure there is on funding, both in the NHS and public services generally. And so what we said to ministers last autumn was, you're at a fork in the road, right? You could either choose to carry on down the path you're going down, and you will just see more and more pharmacies closing and coming under pressure, and the high street becoming sparser for it. And you could see patients suffering and not being able to get hold of their repeat prescriptions, that 25 million people who rely on pharmacy for repeat prescriptions in England. Or you have another option, which is to go down the other fork in the road and to build on that massive and immense contribution during the pandemic and to enable us to do much, much more. But we can only do much more if the investment is made. And so that was what we said to them. And of course, the core funding hasn't been forthcoming, but we will continue always to make that case. But in a climate where, if you look at GPs, the problems with GP practices are so intractable that it's going to take 10 years, really, to get the recruitment and the flexibility within that workforce to be able to respond. And even then, I don't know if it will be able to respond to the demand. That's so intractable and long-term that us being able to offer solutions is a way to get more investment into pharmacy. And so that's the route that we have gone down. And I think by getting Nuffield and King's Fund, who have got that authority as independent organisations, to go around and talk to all of the key influencers in health, in NHS England, in ICBs, in government and outside government, all of those stakeholders, and to talk to us as well, and to come up with what they've come up with, is trying to create a roadmap for the future to say, with the right investment, this is what you could be buying. So we have to still travel both paths. And I even remember having an argument, sorry, I talk too much. I had an argument a little bit with Richard Murray from King's Fund, who was saying to me, you can't go into government, tell them what problems you've got if you want to provide solutions. And I said, we have to, because it's true, but we also have to be able to offer some of those. So that's where I think we have to go in the future. And Pharmacy First is foundational for the future. I do believe that. And I think some of that funding will help, I hope, give a bit more capacity back and to reflect some of the work you're already doing. The second thing about margin, we've talked about it, I know, and I talked about it in my presentation. It's immensely under stress and pressure. It's not sufficient. I think we need to revisit. There are other models of risk sharing and ways to approach medicine procurement. I think it needs reform, but it's when we can get the energy from government to look at that, that's the challenge.
Leila?
Sorry.
I just wanted to repeat the point. about hub and spoke, because I think that that is actually the critical blockage. And until the government decide what it wants to do on hub and spoke, I think we've got a problem. Because so many people are sort of stuck in limbo on this. And, there are different versions of what you mean by hub and spoke. And, is it a complete remote hub? What is the role of the dispensing? And because until we clear those decks, it's going to be very hard for community pharmacy in the high street to be those primary care centres that I used to go on about when I was the minister. But I don't think we should beat ourselves up too much because we have come an awful long way. When I was talking about pharmacy as pre-primary care and was trying to get it built into the primary care plan as part of when I was the primary care minister, it was incredibly difficult. Number 10 just used to look at me with very blank expressions. Pharmacists were seen as stores on the high street where there were funny coloured pills in pots. And I used to say they're highly trained clinical professionals, and they're the ones who are telling me that they've got capacity to do more when everyone else in primary care is telling me that they can't barely breathe. And so that has changed slowly but surely. But until we get a sense as to what the future of dispensing looks like, and I understand why pharmacies cling to nurse for fear of worse on dispensing, because that you get paid through volume. But until the government decides on what it wants to do with hub and spoke, and I don't think they have decided. I mean, they've done all the work on the consultation, and they're sitting there and they're kicking it around, and I suspect it's going between Department and Treasury at the moment as to what that looks like. And I really hope that one of the things that the Select Committee Inquiry can do is just try and basically what we often do through inquiries is we put pressure on, and because they then have to come before us, they make decisions quicker. So you'd be amazed how many letters we get from the Secretary of State about all sorts of things the morning that he's due to come before us to give evidence, because he knows he's going to be asked it. And so what we can do is turn up the heat under their feet. And I hope, unless we turn up the heat some more on hub and spoke, which I said in my remarks we are doing, I think you're in limbo.
Can I just add to that? Yeah. Data right now is showing independents are rising because we've had a lot of multiple branches closed down. So independent numbers are rising. Vast majority of the people here are independents. Can I just have a show of hands? How many people attended the hub and spoke consultation sessions that were held, I think, in the last few months? Longer than that, yeah. How many people? Right. So that's quite evident that this is our community pharmacy workforce. These are the people that absolutely drive community pharmacy, but many of them did not attend the sessions, but a lot of them are done during the daytime where they are providing clinical services, dispensing services to the public, so they could not attend at that time. So how is their voice actually going to be represented? And which was my point right at the beginning, where is our voice as independent pharmacy? Now, I've done an exercise ourselves internally from my own stores for the cost economics of pharmacy. And Layla, what you put up there absolutely resonated with me because it does not work. And plus, all independents do their own buying. They are in charge of their own P&L, so they can control their own costs. So until the government understands what the independents are actually facing on ground level from a hub and spoke perspective, I don't think they can make that decision because it's not going to work. The other part of it is there a level playing field? Because the costs element, and I look at it now with my other hat on from a wholesale perspective where I'm an RP through MHRA, everything is so highly regulated with MHRA through to temperature controlled transportation, going into storage units. When it goes to the next level for hub and spoke, that level, I don't know, will it have an impact on community pharmacy with costs going up again, transportation costs going up again? Who's there kind of bouncing this around for community pharmacy? And that's part of my concern, that if it has now reached Westminster, have these conversations behind, and who is having these conversations with government?
Hassel, could I just come back briefly to the question that was asked by our colleague over here, just to add something from my point of view. We've had a number of roundtable events this year where we've open invitation to members of the profession in different parts of the country just to come and tell us whatever they wanted to tell us, what they were interested in, what they were excited about, what they were worried about. And one of the key themes that's recurred in all of them is, first of all, that pharmacists that have come to our events are very keen to do more because they want to care for people. So they've been telling us they want to do this, but at the same time they're worried about whether they can do that to the right standard without jeopardizing the quality of their existing work, because they aspire to high standards in the way that Hemant was talking about. So I just wanted to add that little bit from a range of different pharmacists from across the country who've been telling us that consistent message. And I guess, therefore, for all of us, it's about how do we support them to do that, to live up to their ambitions, which is what the public are looking for from them. I think the other thing that I would add is that it's clear from some of the concerns that have been raised with us by members of the public over the last year, for example, in relation to things like deliveries and also monitored dosage systems, is there is a very poor level of public understanding of the value of what a community pharmacy gives them and of how that's paid for, or in some cases not paid for at all, actually, by anybody.
Thank you for making that point, because that's the point I wanted to focus on. You are an economist, and you talked about value. Value has to be measured somehow. Where is the tool that is measuring the value of community pharmacy to the government, to the public? So I think there needs to be some academic work needed to be done on a constant basis so that the value is actually... Something significant has happened, and I mentioned it earlier on. The system is changing from medical model to social care model. So the value of the providers will also change. And what we need to make sure is that as the measure changes, we are able to adjust to it and provide adequate evidence of value. Because I think that is the only thing which really matters in the new NHS. Data-driven decisions. That is where we are coming from.
Just to answer your question first, even the department know themselves that it's not a fit-for-purpose thing. Everything that we complain about in relation to medicines issues, medicine supply issues, somehow ends up coming back to the system, and they admit themselves that it's too complicated and it's not fit for purpose. It's just basically having that time to sit down and discuss. And as Steve was saying, obviously there's so many things that they're juggling with at the moment in terms of like getting through the parliament, including Hub and Spoke, that is kind of interfering with that. But rest assured that even the department themselves thinks it's not fit for purpose. So if they think that, it just shows how bad it is. On the Hub and Spoke thing, Hatul, honestly, I can go on for days about this, but the thing with level playing field, I don't know if anyone here attended the pharmacy show session I held on Hub and Spoke and distance selling pharmacies and so on, but there is no level playing field, and I know, Duncan, you're here, and the member of your team kindly came onto the panel about this and was very much squeezed by some of my questions. When it comes to us as community pharmacies and deliveries, we have to make sure that we comply with the CD regulations. We have to make sure that we comply with the cold chain regulations and making sure that fridge items don't get rotten, or wholesalers the same way. But a lot of times, a lot of these distance selling pharmacies and things that come from hubs actually get dispensed by postman, and it just gets delivered in that way without anyone actually checking what's happening. So I think there is a level playing field here that needs to be sorted. And as I said, Hub and Spoke is not a panacea. I don't know why there's such a hype about this, but if you don't have the right funding to operate it, it's not going to be operatable. That's the way it is. And in terms of like contractors, independent contractors giving their prescriptions to the hubs to dispense for them, there are going to be very few, and I want to get a show of hands here. Who in this room would actually get their prescriptions to a hub to dispense for them, give their patient data to a hub to dispense for them? Put your hand up if you actually think that's what you're going to do. Never. Yeah. So it's the realities as well that we need to be aware of.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. I know there are some further comments, but I'm going to just move on. We're pressed for time before lunch, and we've got a final question.
Say a few words in response to some of the things I've heard this morning. Obviously, we're very happy Mr. Bryan flies the pharmacy flag in Parliament, but I think he's slightly out of date, and he should really catch the mood of where pharmacy is at the moment. When Janet says there's no money, I read in the journals that the GPs have received raises, and they were never open during COVID. We seem to be in the same place as nurses who were clapped for and then told, well, there's no extra money for you. It just seems almost as if, pharmacy is prepared to accept from the DOH that there's no money for us, but the GPs are getting a new telephone system so that it has an intelligence. So when people call and their questions are not answered, after a while there's some sort of software where they can call them back. I just think, we keep attending these sessions, we keep listening to the high and mighty who think they know what community pharmacy is about, but it's getting a little bit wearing. I think you should spend a day in community pharmacy, answer all the questions that come on the phone because P2U has delivered and people are not quite sure how to do what with their medication or whatever. But I really think someone needs to understand where we're at as a profession at the moment, the pressures we have, and really, really get real. Talk about pie in the sky, hub and spoke. Who's going to do the NMSs? Who's going to go and talk to the patients? Why don't the GPs give up their lists to the local areas? Why do they hold on to their lists? We want to hold on to our patients. So I really think it's like we're in one place, you're in another. We need to really understand where we're all at if you're representing us.
Do you want to say something first, or Janet? Okay, I got Leila, and then do you want to say something?
Yeah, I completely agree in terms of with what is said. And as I mentioned in my presentation, there is money in the system, okay? Where this money is going is another matter. I have had people inside the NHS England that have said that the money is there, but it's just basically there are loads of duplications and things are not being done the way they should be. So I think it's not the right thing to sit here and say the NHS hasn't got the money. Every government pours a lot of money into the NHS, and where this money goes by the decision makers within NHS is a different story. That's all I wanted to say about that.
Can I just have Janet say a few words on this, and then we'll move over to Mahesh for the final question.
CPE's committee are all pharmacy owners or working pharmacy contractors. So every single one of our committee, it's very hard for them to talk about all these other things and not talk about pressures. It is absolutely fundamentally understood. And I personally spend a lot of time visiting community pharmacies and talking to people about the pressures they're under and the challenges they have. So please understand that we are absolutely part of the same sector. And I completely understand how difficult it is for every single one of you. And it's a shocking shame. And I really do think, and it's hard because Steve is sitting here, and it's this government who have decided, it's not an accident, they decided to fix funding so that it would decrease in value by 30% in real terms, if not more, over the last 5 years. And I believe personally that was done with an agenda to reduce the size of the community pharmacy sector. I know people thought there were too many pharmacies, and now that's come to bear, and actually there's a bit of an alarm and fear about what's happening to this sector. So we shouldn't be surprised. It was a deliberate decision to do that to this sector. However, I think they've now learnt that there is value in us, and we do have to make that case. I know it's not enough, and we are pushing so hard. We got 100 million written off last year. We've got 645 million new investment. I know you think GPs have got a lot of money, but you don't obviously talk to the GPs. They haven't got a lot of money. The IT, the telephony system, that's not 645 million of investment. That's money they already had that was re-announced, and it's hardly anything. It's, you know, millions if anything. So the GPs, however, the new chair of the GPC said to her members, as they wiped out their whole GP committee, their negotiating committee, and re-elected a whole new committee, and the chair of that committee told them there is no more money, we're going to have to work differently. So I'm not starting from the basis there is no money. I'm not starting from the basis we won't even ask for it. We ask for it all of the time. But we also have to do what Tamant said earlier, which is we have to understand what the government's objectives are, whoever that government is, and we have to align what we can offer to their objectives, and we have to be able to provide solutions. So, and I'm sorry if that's upsetting to you, but that is the truth. The NHS have lost 1.3 billion from the strikes so far, and that's an additional hole that will have to be filled. And there is still no end in sight to the struggles in terms of people being able to get a GP appointment, get a dentist appointment, get in to have cancer diagnosis and testing. The waiting lists are out of the door, and I was involved in a Channel 4 News debate about the future of healthcare, and I was talking to a heart surgeon who basically said his list is now self-cleaning, and you know what that means? They're waiting so long they'll die, right? So please don't think that we're not making the case for you, but we have to understand that there's a very full in tray in government for the problems for the NHS, and those won't go away if there's a new government. They're going to have the same challenges. So we have to keep pressing on. We will make the case that you are struggling, you are closing, you are under pressure, you are going into administration. We will always make that case, but we will also say the reason you have to invest is the value that you provide to the community. We are doing the analysis on economic and social value. We're commissioning the analytics to support that case. We need to make that case in terms of Treasury understand, which is a positive return on investment compared with the other investments that they've got on their list. So I'm sorry to go on, but it's really important you understand that, because Community Pharmacy England isn't sitting somewhere where we don't know, because we are absolutely part of the sector and we are making your case as best we can.
Thank you, Janet. Right, Mahesh, no pressure. You're standing between lunch and...
Fine, I'll try and keep it as sharp as possible. But this is a plea to Janet and to Steve. I think the only way we're going to go further and forward with the profession is to make a case about how we can address some of the issues facing the NHS, the crumbling Bevan's NHS, where we need, how do we solve the problem of capacity? How do we address the problems of demand management? How do we, as a profession, face the reality of a falling significant number of GP population? In 1949, the government at that stage passed the Nurses Act, which basically said that nurses would only do what nursing skills allowed them to do. All other jobs would be done by ancillary staff. 75 years later on, it is time to say GPs should only do what GPs can do. If there are any other clinicians who can do other work, they should be doing that other work. And I think all these points and more, Janet, Steve, need to be weaved into our arguments of a business case, make it sharper in the context of how we solve the NHS problem. And I think that's the way forward. Thank you.
So that's exactly what we're trying to do. You know, that's why I said what I said in my remarks this morning about demand, about supply, about the NHS being a sustainable beast or not, and how this sector is part, in my opinion, is part of that solution to the NHS's problems. Going right back, the first question I asked when I walked into the department 6 years ago, was, what's the biggest problem on my inbox to the special advisors, and they said general practice. And general practice told me they couldn't do any more because they were maxed out, and community pharmacy told me that almost the very next meeting that they had capacity and wanted to do more, but they couldn't do it on just goodwill alone. They had to be paid for doing it. And it seemed to me that there was a marriage made in heaven there in primary care. You know, nobody lives in any pie in any sky. You know, I've been a constituency MP for almost 14 years and spent a lot of time in community pharmacies, more than I would suggest most of my colleagues do. And the reason we're doing this inquiry is because we will follow the evidence of what we hear. And today's been really, really useful. I've been furiously writing down notes and texting my clerks, who will be delighted to hear from me on a Sunday morning, of different ideas and different guests that I think can come forward to our thing. The reason I raised hub and spoke is, you know, I wish I'd never raised it. Seems to have got your hackles raised. The fact is that nobody's saying hub and spoke is the answer to your problems. I doubt very much it is. But the fact is that the government have set that hare running and done a big consultation on it, and are going to come forward with an answer to that consultation, which you're going to have to live with, and they did it outside of talking to you. That's why we on the Select Committee are having, a part of the reason why we're having this inquiry is because we're going to pull them before us to try and answer these questions. It's no good having consultations online on Tuesday afternoon. The reason you have your conference on a Sunday is because that's the best time you can get the contractors to come and be part of it. We understand that. I'm not sure the department do, but they have started this ball rolling on hub and spoke, and they are determined to come forward with a response to that consultation. And that's why I said very clearly in my remarks, I'm not so bothered about when they come forward with that. I'm bothered about what they're going to come forward with, because right now I'm fearful of what they're going to come forward with. And we're hoping to inject ourselves into that process before they come forward with a disastrous answer, which I don't think will be what you will like, and it certainly won't be what the contractors who in my constituency will be like. So, you know, we're not in any pie, in any sky. We're listening to what, that's why I give up my Sunday to come and listen to you as chair of the Select Committee. So I don't think it's fair to say that we are out of date. Quite the opposite. We've come to stay up to date.
And I would just say I'm not just trying to suck up to Steve Bryan. Why would I do that if I might be giving evidence shortly to a pharmacy inquiry? But I think it's very, very unusual to get chairs of select committees turning up on Sundays for conferences like this. So I think, thank you. Just on hub and spoke. So yeah, please clap that, because that, honestly, I don't think this amount of access is usual, so I think it's amazing. Just on hub and spoke, I don't really want to get into that, but look, there were two models in the consultation. I'm sure we all responded, didn't we? And there were two models, and of course, we all favoured spoke, hub, spoke. Mm-hmm. But they put the other model, which was spoke, hub, patient. And my suggestion is that they're favouring that, which is, of course, not what we want. And I would like to say reliably, but it is by the government, that it's supposed to come in the spring. But I'll tell you why, because these were all promises that were made at the beginning of a 5-year deal that runs out in March. So back end of a 5-year deal, some of them will be coming through. So that's what they're saying, but we'll talk about that. Going back to what you said, and look, we've talked about this a lot, I know. The whole case that we made for Pharmacy First more than a year ago was because it's about using our professional competencies and skills and our clinical capacity to relieve pressure on primary care, and that there are many other ways we could do it. And that is why the deal is in the primary care recovery plan, because that's what it's about. There is absolutely a shift in terms of policy, and if you look at Labour's policy and how it's developing, clearly that shift towards prevention, away from secondary into primary care, to community, prevention, long-term condition management, all of those are themes. There are themes in this government's policy as well. So that's the direction of travel, and we need to be at the heart of that. And if we're properly funded and invested in, and we can create the teams we need to be able to do so, we have capability. and skills to provide more clinical services that will, by us working at the top of our game, enable GPs to work at the top of their game and start to get into tackling some of the real problems of access. So that is absolutely the case we continue to make, and we will always make that case. And we need to be properly invested in. We're not services on the cheap. We can't be taken for granted anymore. They've taken us for granted for too long, and now they're seeing worrying signs in the sector that's gone too far. So we need to be backed up with the right funding investment and make the right case on that.
Thank you, Janet. No further comments? No.
No.
Thank you.
We need food.
Blood sugar is running low.
Return on investment and expanding estate. Those two headings must be there.
We've commissioned work on the economic and social value of community pharmacy to put it into the Green Book terms that Treasury would recognise in terms of the return on investment for investment in us, and we're doing further commissioning of analytics on that to follow it through, because we absolutely need to demonstrate that. So yeah, we're doing that.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the panelists. Please give them a round of applause.